Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that very exciting countdown and welcome to the session. I think it's a good sign of what's to come in our session here today. Thanks, everyone, for joining. This is going to be our local webinar deep dive on open education. And so this is part of the onboarding program for all the new local members of OGP. My name is Sarah Dixon, and I'm with OGP's Learning and Innovation team, and I also support our Thematic team. And OGP's Thematic team is the team that works with members of the OGP community on the specific policy areas that they're working on in their action plans. And so our team has been working really closely with Rudy, Jose, and Patrick from the local team to help prepare and design this part of the onboarding. Before we get started, I'll just mention a couple brief housekeeping notes. If you could rename yourself in the Zoom app with your name and which OGP local member you're coming from. Also, just a reminder to mute yourself when you're not speaking, use the chat function as much as possible. And I know that our presenters today have a very interactive session, so you'll be invited to, turn on your video, unmute yourself, and participate in the discussion. In addition to today's session on open education, OGP has organized these in-depth learning sessions on a number of policy areas. We're nearing the end of this series, so many of you have probably attended quite a few others, but I will just share the link with all of the other sessions in case you want to take a look and make sure to register for any of the final sessions that you're interested in. So today we're going to be hearing about how you can use your OGP action plan to support commitments related to open education. And before I turn it over to our speakers, I want to give a very brief overview on just some statistics around education-related commitments in OGP. So I'm going to share my screen here. So I want to share just some, basic information to give you sort of a state of play of the type of education-related commitments that have been included in action plans. And I'll preface this before I go into it that these are any commitments that are at all related to education. So you're going to be hearing today more specifically on the theme of open education, which our presenters will go much more into detail on. But these are, say, open contracting commitments that relate to education, open data commitments that relate to education. So it covers a pretty wide range of commitments. But nonetheless, I think it gives a good overview here. We have 58 OGP members, both national and local, who have made over 200 commitments in education. You can see on the map here some of the OGP members who have made the most commitments in this area, and it's a pretty good regional spread. So unlike some of our other themes where we have one region who's really, the leader in focusing on a commitment area, this has been across the map. And I just wanted to highlight two commitments because these are coming from local members of OGP. First, we have a commitment in Buenos Aires that is an online platform that allows citizens to access information and monitor the development of ongoing education infrastructure projects. We also have a commitment in Kigoma, Tanzania, where the municipal government regularly is publishing data online about school funding, expenditures, students, staff numbers, school labor needs, and school building infrastructure. So these are two examples, I think, that are a bit different than what will be covered in the presentation today. But I think just wanted to highlight these because, like a lot of our themes that we're going into, they're very cross-cutting, and commitments don't always just fit into one bucket of themes. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce our speakers today on open education. We are very lucky to have Jennryn Wetzler here with us, who is the Assistant Director of Open Education at Creative Commons. We also have Jan Gondol, who is the CEO of Switzerlab, which is a consulting company that helps organizations with open data and open collaboration. Both Jennryn and Jan have personal experience working on OGP open education commitments. So we're very grateful to have them here with us today. They really have a wealth of experience to share. And I know that they have a very interactive and exciting session lined up for us. So with that, I will turn it over to them to begin the session.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And wow, this is impressive. I mean, seeing data as of 15th of March, 2021, that's pretty fresh. And this is what you can do when you have access to data, and that's fantastic. So thank you for that. And everyone, big welcome. Thank you for coming here today. And I don't know if you know, but we are actually writing history. When we look back at how open education in OGP Local started, this webinar is going to have a big space, important mention there. So for some of you, this is early morning. For some of you, this is the afternoon. And thank you so much for finding the time. And it's really awesome that you can be here. And also big welcome to everyone who's watching this on recording. So as Sarah mentioned, my name is Gondol. I'm from Bratislava, Slovakia, and I'm the former OGP point of contact at the national level for Slovakia. Bratislava is a really interesting city in the sense that it's the only capital in the world that borders with 2 countries. So 5 minutes that way, it's Austria, and 5 minutes that way is Hungary. And if you hop in the car, you can actually visit 4 countries in 1 hour, depending on how fast you drive: Slovakia, Austria, Hungary, and Czech Republic. So that's kind of like a little nugget. And I have 3 kids, and trying to keep sanity during this quarantine time. and yeah, so that'll be about me. Just like Sarah mentioned, I work in my company with organizations like businesses and nonprofits and local cities on things like open data, open educational resources, and help them out. And I'm really happy to be here with Jennryn today.
Thanks so much. And I'm delighted to be here too. As Sarah mentioned, my name's Jennryn Wetzler, and I used to work at the US Department of State, getting to focus a little bit on OGP related projects. And I'm now the Assistant Director of Open Education at Creative Commons. So you may have heard of Creative Commons. If not, I'll post a little link about what we do in the chat space. But Creative Commons is the legal steward and created the open licenses that power a lot of open movements in education, in data, in science, in government, and more. So delighted to be here. I'll post the link right there. And just related to OGP, so in 2014, Jan and I actually started collaborating from our respective national governments on OGP projects. So we initiated and implemented 2 out of the first, I think, 3 open education commitments for the OGP at the national level, and then got so excited about it, we started organizing a community of open education advocates, so organizations like Spark and Creative Commons, and then OGP stakeholders that were interested in open education as well. And we were thrilled to see a lot of OGP countries start to embrace OER, or open educational resources, a little bit more in depth in their commitments. And then since then, we've been just delighted to start to work with the Open Government Partnership local folks. So it's a real pleasure to be here. We're really hoping to see OGP Local grow with all of you. And we expect that you working in your local governments have a closer connection to the needs of your communities. And we'll hope that you take advantage of the flexibility and some of the creative opportunities that OGP Local affords to better serve your community needs. So we wanted to send a special thank you to our OGP Local Support Unit and colleagues, Jose Maria Marin, Rudy Borman, Sarah Dixon, and Patrick Kaziak Albaladeo. We also wanted to start off by thanking all of you for being here with us today. What you're doing with OGP work is ultimately a form of social transformation. OGP work uproots the traditional structures of governance, making the new default a baseline of transparency. But we know transparency is not enough in itself. We need the crucial element of building civic engagement into that, taking advantage of the information that's available. By choosing open as a default, whether it's opening access to data or resources or contracting procedures or instating open policies, for example, we create the best possible architecture for social systems to build for regular improvement and ultimately for social transformation. So we're really geared toward that with this open education call today. So I just wanted to mention a couple sort of housekeeping items for our call today so we can make sure this is as fun and as engaging as possible for you. We're hoping that this call will be a great chance for us to put open education into practice. So with this call, we'll be creating some resources together. We'll be creating a resource with our chat log. So please feel free to post any artifact or resource link, anything that you find interesting in the chat space, or just simply type out something interesting that you hear in conversation. And it's okay if the chat is busy, we can always return to it afterward to follow up on some of the details and read some of the resources and so on. We're also going to be recording this session and CC licensing it. So that means we'll apply an open license and make it available to as many people who want to see it as possible. So those are two ways that we're making this sort of an open education opportunity. Excuse me. Please also turn on your microphones, turn on your cameras, feel free to blur your backgrounds if you need, take our polls, and really be here with us right now. I know everyone's very busy, but we really want to make the most of our time. So we ask for you to ideally participate as much and as thoroughly as you can. Thank you so much. Okay, and I think Jan's going to start us off with our first activity.
Yes, so let's make this interactive. Now we're going to have the first breakout room, and we will split to groups of 3 people so that we can have a little conversation. And the prompt to discuss would be this. So think of the last time you felt really triumphant about learning something new. Could be in school, could be outside of school, and think about what it was and what made it possible. So what is it that happened that you were able, that enabled you to learn this new thing? And when I was thinking about my latest triumph, it may seem trivial to you, but it was a little important. It was quite important to me. So during the pandemic, I finally learned how to perfect the art of cooking rice. So I wanted to cook rice in a way that's automatic, because I would sometimes forget to turn off the stove and only realize when there was a ton of smoke. So I was looking for a way to cook rice well without a rice cooker, just on a stove. So I found the perfect balance between the amount of water, the perfect ratio between the amount of water and the rice, the exact level on the stove, how to set it up, and the exact length of time. So I was playing with this, I perfected it, and now I can finally cook rice completely hands off. It took 44 minutes at number 4, and you need twice as much water as rice in my specific case, to my own taste. So it may seem trivial to you, but this was pretty cool. And what enabled it was the experimentation, that I could try things out, and there was not a big deal if I failed and didn't do it right the first time. So yeah, that was my big triumph during the pandemic. So now we'll go to breakout rooms. You can discuss your triumphs. They could be more substantial. They could be also something smaller. And we'll have roughly 6 minutes for these breakout rooms. There'll be 3 of you in each room. You will have 2 minutes to discuss, share whatever it is that you learned. At the end, you will see a countdown timer that will ask you to join the main room. Just log in 1 to 0. You could just use all the time that you have. So okay, I think we're ready to go to the breakout rooms. When you see the prompt, just click join. Here we are. Cool.
You take us back right in the moment we were almost like solving the word problems.
Oh my goodness.
Thankfully,
there's another breakout room. Thankfully, there's more. All right. So hopefully it was fun. Hope you enjoyed it. Did you? Yeah. Very cool. All right. So now we'll do something that we call the chat bomb. So don't worry, it's not dangerous. What we'll do now, if you can open your chat. We'd like to ask you to share 1 or 2 highlights from your discussion. Could be anything that caught your attention. So anything you'd like. But when you type it out, do not press enter yet. Okay, we'll all press enter at the same time. It's gonna be more fun. So Jennryn will time out. We'll have 90 seconds to do that. So 1 or 2 things that you remember from the chats, your personal highlights. Okay.
Starting the timer now. We're giving folks a lot of deadlines pretty early in the morning for some of us. You're about halfway through. This is good. I expected a couple people to accidentally press enter. That's what I would have done. Okay, and that was 90 minutes or 90 seconds.
Okay, so I'll count down from 3 to 0, and at 0, everybody press enter. Okay, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ooh.
Oh, it's coming! It's coming! Very cool. All right. So thank you for playing along, and okay, we can read through those, but even before we do, is would any one of you like to share also in person what you discussed and what you found interesting? And Jennryn already shared what she learned and what the highlight is. So Jennryn, would you like to start first?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I actually didn't end up typing it in the chat space, but happy to share it here. So the thing that came to mind when I was thinking about this prompt was I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Niger, West Africa, and so excited to start working in a local clinic shadowing a midwife. So on my first day on the job, I show up and they have me, put on this kind of midwife smock, and I feel like I'm just pretending to, be a midwife, but not actually going to do anything. Anyway, they had me deliver a baby on my first day with no training and no prep in a foreign language. And it was amazing. It was absolutely incredible. I felt physically overwhelmed because of the scent of blood, but the actual experience of being able to help this young woman bring a gorgeous new Fulani baby girl into the world was one of the most powerful experiences I think I've ever had in my life. And since then, I've brought that back with me to the States. So I've never forgotten that experience. I ended up becoming a birth helper on the side, my side job. So I'm a doula on the side, helping women birth their children here in the States now too. So I think that experience of learning and triumph was really powerful for me at the time, and it still continues to be powerful. And I think it was actually possible because even though I had no experience and probably should not have been doing it in the first place, I had such support. There was a team of us that were working together on one very specific goal or problem to solve. Like we wanted to bring this healthy new baby into the world. And I think that kind of collaboration and flexibility to kind of go off script, not read any medical manuals, but get right into it, really made that experience possible. That's
really powerful stuff. I had goosebumps the first time I heard it. I had goosebumps again. Okay, anyone else would like to share? Who's next?
Sounds like Carolina learned to deal with 100 new challenges, so I'm sure we have some examples. Roger perfected his paella.
Hi. I learned to be an octopus during this period. I have to deal with my job, whole complete new things in this pandemic. And also I have had to take care of my house, my children, everything together in the same space. And not so challenging, I think, about giving birth a baby, helping this process. It's much bigger. And wow, I'm jealous about this. I didn't make something.
No, I mean, you have to focus on so many different things. That was just focusing on one thing at a time.
Okay, that's it. I think as me, much more persons and women have to do the same, but each particular, it was very hard for me.
So you discovered you were a superwoman. We had superpowers doing all of those things. I didn't even know that before. Awesome.
At least I survived.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for making the time to show up for this webinar today. I know you're probably still being an octopus. You're probably still having to do so many different things all at once. So that means all the more to us that you're here participating right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to share? Jennryn, you kind of floored us, with your powerful experience. Some people are not shy, like, I do not have a story as powerful as delivering a baby, but it could be anything. So, or if you don't want to read that out, can we just maybe read from the chat? So, so one of the things, new and really fast time management style. That'd be fun to hear about that. So maybe we can talk about it after the call. And also, Jen, would you like to read some of the highlights from the chat?
So it looks like Roger perfected his paella. Working from home allows for more flexibility to make last-minute meetings, which is great. Sandra's new side business for making natural cosmetics, including soap. That's awesome. I started making soap too. I haven't made any other products, but I would love to hear about some tips there. It sounded like an awesome project. We also learned that Fernando is part of a very interesting lifelong learning program working with people of varying ages, which sounded really interesting and exciting. This is great.
Fantastic.
Jan learned that we should get more time for breakout rooms.
Yeah, should totally do that. This is the best thing now that you're in OGP. It was one of my favorite parts when I was the OGP point of contact, is getting to know everyone here in the network, because it's people who have the same values as you, who value the same things, who also see the bigger picture for the government, and who are super smart and doing very interesting things. So I think the best thing you can do is to find time to reach out to each other and do the network, and this is really the best part. So yeah, cool.
Well, just one more to read. Paloma mentioned that challenge situations are an opportunity to learn from different perspectives, and that also seems to really apply to OGP too. I mean, we have such a wonderful chance to learn from everyone's different perspectives here. Thank you so much. Okay, sorry, Jan.
No, let's play it again. Okay.
All right, so next up, we have one more level of interaction for you right now. And then I swear we're gonna describe what open education is. So hold on to your hats. I know it's kind of the punchline's buried in here. Okay, so first what I want you to do is take your fingers, you can take your thumb or your finger and literally just cover up your cameras. So good, I'm seeing kind of a mosaic of colors right now. I see some pinks and reds and blacks and purples. Everyone has different blue blood. Fingers.
Some people have blue blood.
Yeah, blue blood. Okay, so now only take your fingers off, keep your fingers on, only take them off when you can answer yes to one of my questions, okay? And keep your fingers off once you've answered yes. My first question is, and I'm gonna take mine off just because I'm reading. My first question is, how many of you have applied a Creative Commons license to your own work? So I'm taking mine off because I have, Jan's taken his off. Everyone else still has their fingers on. Oh, Rudy's saying, okay, great. A couple are peeking. Otherwise, keep your fingers there. The second question is, how many of you have reused an image from Flickr, or maybe quoted a Wikipedia article with friends? Okay, some more fingers are coming off. I'm seeing faces emerge again. I still see a finger left and some videos off. All right, great. Last question. How many of you have read Wikipedia? Okay, all of the fingers are off. That's great. So this was just kind of an easy way to demonstrate that all of these are uses of open education or open educational resources, OER. You're already using open education, whether or not you realized it from the start. So this webinar in itself is about open education, and it's about what it means to kind of expand access to educational resources for all learners, and why open education is especially important in our current historic and very urgent moment. We're all in the pandemic together, and there's all the more need for focusing on open education as a way to kind of provide greater resources to people who really need them desperately right now. Okay. So what I'm going to do, bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to share my screen and just share a couple PowerPoint slides. We had a full PowerPoint that we were going to probably bore you to tears with, but we'll make that available afterward. Here is, hopefully everyone's seeing my open education slide. Okay, great. So we'll make the full slide deck available afterward. That is also open licensed. Education is about sharing, right? So open education is about sharing the knowledge, access to information and resources so that people can problem solve and think critically about their context and improve upon it. Education is ultimately about enabling the conditions to transform our societies for the better. Open education is actually a global movement about sharing knowledge better. So the way I think about it, and the way a lot of people think about it, is open education being kind of a term that's an umbrella for 3 different elements. So we've got open educational resources, which include anything from PowerPoint slides to class syllabi, to videos or books or educational games and software and more. As long as these are legally open through their use of an open copyright license, generally a Creative Commons license, or they're in the public domain, they're available to as many people as want to access them, and in perpetuity. That word's always hard for me. So open educational resources are actually kind of the foundation for open educational practices. Open educational practices build on OER and they increase learners' agency. So they are ways to include more options for collaboration, accessibility, and active learning, where the educators and the learners work together. Then we also have open educational policies. So these are kind of the formal regulations regarding support, funding, adoption, and use of not just the OER or the resources, but also sometimes the practices as well. So when you think about it, traditional policies often inadvertently close access to resources rather than open them further. So maybe policymakers have really wonderful intentions to provide more resources, but sometimes the traditional policies inadvertently close the access a little bit more than intended. And right now, we're seeing the result of that even more profoundly given COVID. So publicly funded educational resources may not be available to the public that's actually funding them, or donor-funded resources may not be as efficiently used as possible when people most need them. Further, educational systems right now are being easily deprioritized given the reallocation of funds for COVID responses. So what I'm arguing is it may not be an either or. We need to respond to COVID, but we also need to lay the groundwork for this open education response with the same kinds of policies. So open educational policies include requirements for publicly funded resources to be openly licensed and available to the public forever, not just during the duration of the grant or contract. They enable more efficiency and financial responsibility and transparency for public funds, which helps with trust building for civil society. And this is where you come in. So I'm going to actually share a couple links in our chat space so you can read about open educational resources, about practices and policy after this webinar if you'd like. But before we move on, I know we're kind of sharing a lot of definitions. I wanted to pause and just see if anyone had any questions. And feel free to type any questions at any time into the chat space, but also you're welcome to unmute and ask any questions that you'd like about the definitions or how they work together here. All right, I'm not seeing any questions coming in right now, so I'm gonna barrel on forward and just give a couple examples of what we mean about open education through a couple stories that we have for you. So these stories are kind of about the education system failure and also the urgency for system change that we see on full display. Okay, I think Jan, did you want to share your story about Sonia?
Yes. So we have these 3 parts: open educational resources, open educational practices and open educational policies. And this story is about the first part, about open educational resources. So I see Lucia here. Hey, welcome. Our colleague, she has a daughter, and she's studying for her final exams. Her name is Sonia, and she's pretty computer, she's skilled, and she just got caught at home when there was lockdown. The schools were closed, and she was unable to go to the school. So she couldn't go pick up the books. She couldn't go to the learning center, to the library. She was stuck at home, and she still had to study for the final exams. And Sonia thought, okay, well, no big deal. In Slovakia, we have a system where we invest a lot of public money to create educational resources. So she thought, yeah, there's a website with digital textbooks. I'll just go there and download whatever I need, whatever might be helpful. So that's what she did. But she found out that all those resources, it was a really hard time it was really hard for her to access those resources. And when she was able to finally download something, she found out that it's protected by something called DRM, Digital Rights Management. So it was basically locked down the same way Netflix is. And she was unable to open anything. So she reached out to the tech support at the Ministry of Education and received some non-helpful answers. And she was thankfully able to escalate it all the way to the minister's office. And the response that she got back was, we are sorry that you have these problems. You are using the wrong type of computer. You have a Macintosh. You need to buy a computer with Microsoft Windows. And we wish you good luck studying for your final exams. That was the response, basically. And so she was basically told, you have the wrong computer. You have a Mac, so you cannot study. And if you can afford a Mac, you can afford a Windows machine. And it's completely nonsensical because we spend public money to create a lot of these resources. And instead of encouraging their reuse, their sharing, because we did not put policies in place in time, these resources were locked by default, because that's how copyright works. When somebody creates something, it's protected by copyright. When you look at a CD, all rights reserved. That's the default. And to change that default, to make those resources available, you need to apply an open public license to that resource. And that's where Sonia got stuck. So that's the first part that we discussed, open educational resources, and how the system failed in that area.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and I had a similarly frustrating situation, although it wasn't pandemic related. So another Peace Corps moment. So in Niger, I was living in this kind of desert village of subsistence farmers where schooling was at best an afterthought for everyone in the community. So students of all ages were kind of crammed into a small schoolhouse and expected to learn by rote memorization and in a language, French, that they didn't speak. And often they were incentivized with a millet stalk stick. So it was kind of a tough learning environment. And I remember wanting to help some of my friends who were kids in these classes. So they would come over to my hut with their homework, and they'd open their little dusty notebooks on the ground. And I would expect that we would start with reading and like looking at their writing and seeing where we could help them. But all I'd see in their notebooks were tiny triangles and circles and like really strange shapes that they had clearly labored over. I wasn't actually seeing any letters, let alone words. So what they were trying to do was just simply imitate what they saw on the teacher's chalkboard, but they weren't learning to read or write. They had no personal connection to the lessons or any kind of encouragement to create or collaborate or problem solve any real world challenges that might have encouraged them to learn a little bit more. But at the same time, outside of the classroom, I was floored to see so much creativity, so much resilience and problem solving all across the community. So their parents, the kids themselves, their community members, their default mode was to just problem solve. So I remember, for example, we would always ride these really strange bush taxis, which were generally dilapidated trucks or 1950s Land Rovers that were somehow revived. And they would inevitably break down along the side of the road. But inevitably, people would pop down out of the bush taxis and pop the hood and just start to tinker with whatever was wrong. They would often only have a crowbar, maybe a socket wrench or two, and one way or the other, they would figure it out, get the bush taxi rolling again, and we would be on our way. And that was just kind of the expected default to problem solve. They just knew that this was their only option, so they did it. They always found a way to make things work. So kind of a random example, but it has me thinking about how we have these systems built ideally for our students, but each time our students in our communities cannot access the educational resources that they need, our systems are actually failing them. Fortunately, these kinds of failures in education policies, resources, or practices, all of education, don't have to be the case, obviously. So in a bit, we'll share some examples of past policy solutions and successful projects that really kind of turn that around. But first, we wanted to hear from you a little bit more as well. So Jan, over to you. I know you had some examples you wanted to share from our conversations with folks.
Thank you. What we did before this call, we reached out to about 10% of the new OGP local members to discuss your challenges and what's ahead of you. So what we found out that there's a lot of things that you have in common, and some things that are different. You know, you're at different stages of the preparation of the action plan. Some of you are almost done. Some of you are still in the process of preparing that and open to including new commitments. You have different levels of political support. For some of you, there's going to be an election next year. For some of you, you're just getting started and the field is wide open and you can do basically whatever commitments you want, even if they take a little longer to implement. So there's different stages, and there were some common themes. What we heard from you was that you have a lot of your own educational programs, so to educate people in terms of participation and civics. So you have a lot of activities there from what we heard, and you also give grants to external educational programs. So basically pay typically nonprofits, give them a grant, and they create something. And and there were also challenges related to that, but we could either dive into these examples and talk about possible approaches to make that situation better. But we'd like to do something a little different. Whether your challenge is open educational resources, whether it's something related to licenses or something else entirely, like infrastructure. That was also something that we heard, that there's communities where there's a big problem that students are not able to access education during the times of COVID, and it's a very serious issue. So there's a lot of things that we could tackle, but instead of just discussing those 10%, we would like to give the floor to you again, at the risk of not giving you enough time to solve all the world's problems. We can solve at least some, and instead of 2 minutes per person, we'll have 3, and then we will also have a discussion back in the main room. So now what we'd like to do is just to have you discuss what's top of mind for you when you think about education in your own local communities. What is it that first comes to mind, either as a challenge or something that you think needs to be addressed, or something that you would just like to share with in this group? So we'll have another breakout room, and then we'll be also sharing just like the first time when we get back. So Jennryn, would you like to start us off?
Hello.
I have to leave you because we have an OGP local meeting, which is starting. Roger and I. Roger is my coordinator, and we have to report back. We now have what we call the Grupo Motor, which was a nickname that Roger put, the Impulse Group. All right, and we have 4 working all these months since last year, and now we're going to be 10. So
wow,
to share with the other 6 and give them all the feedback, and then let them get to work with us, because the overload is just. Yesterday I was with Argentina on the Justice Department, and we've hitched up with them because we work on a volunteer group. Just for your information, we were suggesting to the Mexican Sandra, I think, who was in my group, that we have been recycling computers before the pandemics.
Oh
And
my
it
goodness.
turned out very, very useful
Oh,
because
okay.
we have a problem. The families cannot afford to buy a computer.
Right, right.
Right?
Oh my goodness, that was bad
Pleasure.
timing. Well, thank you so much, Fernando, for showing up, and thank you for finding the
See you
time.
soon.
Yeah,
See
see
you
you
soon.
soon. Thank
Take
you so
care.
much for coming. Looks like folks are trickling back from their conversations. Let's see, I think we've got another 15 seconds before the breakout rooms close. So thank you all for participating and hope that was fun. Let's see, another 5.
Andrea is already typing her response. She's writing an essay, I think.
That was a secret, but now it's not.
Now it's public. There's no secrets. This is all about openness.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, well, not my fault.
Sorry that our friends from Catalonia have to run, but they have the their very first multi-stakeholder meeting happening as we speak in Catalonia. So they had to be there. So I'm apologizing for them.
No, we're very happy. Fernando had mentioned that, and we're delighted that we can be the last thing on their mind before their multi-stakeholder meeting.
Oh yeah, and I actually cut off a meeting today. I said, I'm not going there because it was 1 hour before this. I said, I know I want to be hyper focused. So I really appreciate that Fernando said, I'm actually showing up, and that's a big thing. So that's very cool.
That's great.
All right, so same thing as before. We're going to do the chat bump if you agree. So you can open up your chat, and again, what are 1 or 2 highlights from the discussions so that we can read them and share them. And Jennryn, will you time us again? 1.5 minutes, 90 seconds.
Yep. There we go. It started. This time I'll actually type something in the chat too.
Okay, Jennryn, how much time do we have?
We have about 10 seconds left.
So are your fingers itching already to hit the enter key? Don't hit it yet.
Okay, and that's time.
There we go. So 3, 2, 1, go. This is actually real fun when you're in a call where there's 200 or 300 people, and it's really funny when it happens there. It's just floods your screen. It's just pretty wild and impossible to read. But just like Jennryn said, we are creating a resource. We are doing this the way that we believe that a lot of education can be enhanced in very simple ways, just by getting more involved, and instead of one talking head speaking at you, creating something together, having interactions and learning as a group, because that's so much more powerful. So just experiencing what it is to have open educational practices in real life. Before we dive into this, would someone like to share some of the readings on the camera?
I can come in.
Go for it.
Yeah, we were talking with Paloma and Eliona on specific challenges in particular in Colombia and Albania, and they both share similar challenges. I mean, we arrived to the point to identifying the challenge, the obvious challenge of connectivity and the capacity, and also reflect a little bit on the rural areas that were also far away from getting regular accessibility. With the pandemic, everything even worse. So we try to do a reflection on the importance of educational resources to be more, let's say, plastic in terms of how can you make it useful to everyone. And in Argentina, it's the same. So Albania, Colombia, Argentina, in this case, on the conversation, we arrived to the same idea, and also the importance of how, in many cases, teachers themselves were self-taught in order to adapt to the changing environment in the context, particularly in this case of the pandemic. So also that self capacity to find their way into how do we do this? You know, if the system is not teaching us to adapt to a very complex situation, how do we do it ourselves?
Yeah, that resonates. That's something that I've heard echoed in a lot of conversations in the US too, outside of OGP. But on one hand, people can have greater flexibility, or as you said, more kind of plasticity, plastic-like flexibility, working with open educational resources, because they allow for that adaptation and an adjustment based on the local needs of the learners and the teachers and so on. But there's also a challenge of like bringing resources to educators so that they can start to translate their curricula into something digital, something that's flexible and useful and so on for their students. So I think OER offers the resilience and the flexibility needed, but we still need to work on the kind of practices to bring educators along and give them the scaffolding or the support structures that they need for this. It's a complicated situation.
And for the places,
can I
please?
Can I say something? Just one thing, that the problem with the democratization of information and knowledge has focused on the internet, but not all the children and, for example, adolescents have access to it. So we talked about the Creative Commons that Rudy told us or mentioned about an ideas about, for example, he said, I don't remember all, but he said, for example, some of the teachers can access and, for example, printed or some of these. Yeah, I think that makes me realize other material that the teacher can access, and I think that this is the difference. Not put all the information for the teacher that is impossible for them share with the students, when the students can access to the internet, and is really difficult for them. And well, it's because of that I put in my comments, Creative Commons will be an excellent way to share knowledge without thinking about needing an unlimited internet. So just that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I was just looking for a couple websites because what you bring up is so important. I think we kind of take for granted in a lot of locations that everyone has access to internet, for example, already, but so many students don't have access to internet. And that was the major problem that was reflected back to me when I talked to the OGP local counterpart in Los Angeles in the US. Here is a really wonderful organization that brings open educational resources to offline communities. So they work with Creative Commons licensed resources, but for low bandwidth and offline communities all over the world.
And also because, for example, when you said open education policies, I thought that, okay, it's one of the lines is focus on internet, but the other is okay, try to try to help the other people that till now is without the internet, and it's a lot of people, you know. So
yeah, one of the cool things that has been happening, and I believe Learning Equality is doing something along those lines as well. There's organizations that focus specifically for communities that do not have access to the internet. So what they do, some of these organizations, and I know there's several of them. Maybe you heard about these computers called Raspberry Pi. You know, it's wordplay, like you know, these small computers. They can be powered by the battery or a solar panel. And what you can do is just connect the hard drive to the Raspberry Pi, and it has a Wi-Fi module. So it can provide internet Wi-Fi signal to you know, to the neighborhood or the area of a few classrooms. So what they do, they prepare materials that are saved on those hard drives and can be shared. So if like the entire offline Wikipedia, okay. So there's a lot of resources that are available, and also a ton of other open educational resources. And when someone from the school wants to access those resources, they don't have to go to the internet. They only have to go to the Raspberry Pi, which is in their room. So as long as there's at least some very basic infrastructure in that school, you know, like electricity, or not even that, you know, but there needs to be at least a computer to show that materials, or a printer to print them out. But they have a lot of the resources available locally with no connection whatsoever. And there are ways how to update that. You know, it's called the sneaker net. So instead of downloading stuff from the internet, you just walk somewhere and with your hard drive and save a newer version of the Wikipedia, and you have those resources. So that's, you know, there are organizations that focus specifically on communities that have a lack of access.
Thanks. I will search.
Yes, Rudy.
Sorry, very short, but I would love to have, because what you're saying is super interesting, but of course challenging in the terms of the implementation, and makes very important the role, of course, the students, but also teachers. So maybe Jan got your sense on the because the example you are giving is a clear example of the power of how technology can help, but also the distance you need to bridge to make possible that a teacher, let's say in Paloma's hometown in Colombia, will grasp those type of ideas. How do you accelerate that? Just a reflection, because I always wanted to ask you that.
That's a great question. So much of, I think, the open educational practices come down to what you're referring to, and that's the system change, the kind of the cultural shift that's needed to embrace a different approach to education. So people don't just think that technology is the simple solution. It's not about technology. So there are, I think there are a lot of different ways to, excuse me, address how social change happens. What I've found is that a lot of it really takes time. A lot of it takes the collaborations that we can develop between communities that may be adjacent to open education. So the Open Government Partnership Network has connections to so many different communities that can help strengthen the messages of, okay, you have to use not just Raspberry Pi computers to connect the resources to offline communities, but you also need the trained, the trained facilitators or instructors and teachers and administrators in the education systems. You need sort of a more of a holistic system approach rather than just technology or just one intervention. It has to be much more integrated. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're so excited to, keep working with the OGP, is because this is the ideal platform for that more holistic integration. It can draw from all the different sectors of a given community or society to really look at what's needed for integrated change. But this kind of social change takes a lot of time. I posted one other link. I posted a few different links that either work with Raspberry Pi, organizations that work with Raspberry Pi, or excuse me, that are looking at different approaches to low bandwidth or offline communities. But then the last organization is one that works within communities to not just bring access to open educational resources, but also create sort of a community development program around some of the different educational needs. So this was actually an organization that we worked with when piloting one of the OER pilots for our Open Government Partnership National Action Plan commitment. It's called Open Learning Exchange, and they created kind of a really nice system where people would have they would have movie nights in a local library, and they would have not just the tangible educational resources available, but more community support included, which I think was really essential.
Yeah, and just to echo Jennryn, technology is not the savior. It was just one of the many tools that we can use, and open education is used in places where there's no internet whatsoever. Sometimes people do not even know that they're using open educational resources or open educational practices, but it's already happening. And just to highlight, this is kind of like a mindset shift, right? Because oftentimes working on OGP starts with things like transparency. So publishing data, publishing financial records, that sort of thing is like a stepping stone to everything else. And then comes the next level, and the next level is participation. So people realize, why do we even have all those things? Why would we even want to see what's going on in the government? Well, because we want the government of the people, for the people, right? So we want like people being involved in. How can they be involved? How can they trust their government if they don't know what's going on? So that's the next level. And there's another level beyond that, and not everybody gets to that even higher level, and it's just opening up everything by default. So if there's a reason to keep some things secrets, to keep some processes, confidential, that can be done. But the default is to open everything, open all the information, and open all the data, because it could be useful. It's just it's a mindset shift. So instead of locking everything and unlocking as necessary, there's some things that we will definitely lock away, things like personal data, stuff that is sensitive, that just should not be leaked. We do not want to publish that, no. So there are some categories of information that will stay locked, and that's good. But everything else, unless there is a reason to lock it down, we just open it by default and see how everyone uses that, and that's how the society can evolve. So the mindset shift would kind of like the big takeaway. Okay, anyone else would like to share what you discussed? Paloma, just unmute yourself.
No, I'm just, well, I think that this topic is a big, I don't know, a big thing in my mind. So I think that it's an endless. But I'm just thinking about it's a change of mindset and I don't know if we will continue with the practices, but it is something with the teachers and also with the communities. And Jennryn, you said something with holistic, and I really like this holistic education and all this movement, because I also think that will be no, I don't know if the solution, but one of the ways, that good ways, using the technology and the resources that we also had it. So talking about the technology in, for example, in some regions in Colombia, we don't have the internet, but we are using other things, and for example the nature and is useful for the children. So I think that is just added the technology in these areas, and yeah, that's it. And is for me is that the holistic education, and and the nature is the other resource.
Sorry, so you were saying that there are opportunities for more holistic education using nature and so on. And then was the last part a question about other resources?
No, for me, is more the practices. I don't know if we will go into the practices, to the open education practices, but it's more if it's possible, open if it's possible, open the education practices with the technology and how will be like match the two things.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. So like you were saying, I think it's so context specific. So where there's limited internet, for example, relying on practices that look at what you can learn from nature and what you can do without internet is essential. And then in other contexts, looking at the kind of practices that are available with access to internet, that's a lot easier. So a lot of the open educational practices are kind of broader practices that look at ways to broaden access, whether it's online or possibly offline. But practices can include things like open pedagogy, which looks at co-creation. So working with the educator and the participant or the student to co-create something that's of use and of value beyond the individual lesson at hand. So making sure that they are part of something that's larger than them. They're problem solving to a problem that will help the larger society or their community beyond just that immediate lesson that they're trying to learn in the classroom. And that can be done online and it can be done offline. I'm happy to share plenty more resources on open educational practices after this call. I'll also see if I can share them on a website that we'll link to at the very end.
Please.
Yeah, can we? Yeah, and we created a resource for you so that you can come back and read through all of these things, and possibly you gave us prompts to include some other useful stuff. So in the next couple of days we'll update that site and make sure that you have examples that you can pick up and stuff to read if you're interested. Also, Jennryn and I are available to you for one-on-one consultation. So if you'd like to reach out afterwards, we'd be more than happy to work with you. Also, we're coming close to the end of the scheduled session. If it's helpful to some of you, after we officially conclude, we can either stay in this room or available for another half an hour. We can connect separately, but even if you'd like to continue the conversation, we can do that. So we're wrapping up soon. But before we do, let me share a specific example of a small policy initiative that you can pick up if you still have, you have the limit of 5 commitments, and maybe you have 2 or 3, like some cities do. There's something very simple that you can try to implement if that makes sense to you. Like, for example, we spoke with Banska Bystrica, and there's this interesting situation where they give out grants and they finance various activities, and oftentimes one of those results or outcomes of the grants that they produce is some sort of publication. And what they require the recipient of the fund to do is to give them a copy so that they can prove, like, yeah, this is what happened, this is the outcome. And that copy, and Andrea, please correct me if I'm misremembering this, is stored at the mayor's office. So if the citizens want to see that, they can visit and see, yeah, this activity happened, this is the outcome, cool. The trouble with this. This is obviously a much better approach than not having anything, any policy in place. So they spend it, and maybe they created something, maybe they did not. But the obvious limitation during the COVID era is that you just cannot get to the mayor's office, right? I mean, it's logged; they will not let you in. So if you want to see those results, there's no way to see them. And one of the things that you can do, and you don't have to do the big bang and do it for all the grants and for all the outcomes, but really at least think about it. And this is also for those who watch this on the recording. Think about ways to open up a little bit. So if you give out a grant and someone receives the money and they create a publication, So instead of just giving you a physical copy, ask them to provide a digital copy that you can upload to your city's website, for example, and ask them to give permission for that to be shared and reused, so that it has much bigger impact, better than if someone just visits it and reads it, in the hidden chamber somewhere hidden in the building. Now everyone can see that on the internet and reuse it for other purposes. So your grant has a much bigger impact. And there's a very, very easy and very practical way for you to adopt a simple open policy that will enable that. And the website that we prepare, there's actually an example of language that you can use. You can basically just copy and paste it and just localize it for your local context. So it can work for you. So this is just one practical example.
Thanks so much, Jan. I'm going to share, I realize that we're almost out of time, so I'm going to share our email addresses and the website on which we'll link additional resources that we didn't get a chance to mention in this webinar. So here it is. I'm also sharing my personal email address only because I'll be on maternity leave starting next month. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are delighted to communicate with any of you, whether it's through email, through any kind of consultation or a training on open licensing or whatever would help you. This webinar was kind of just, as organizers described it to us, a teaser, like a movie trailer. We weren't able to get into the really deep elements of open education that we can certainly get into and would love to get into with you in follow-up conversations. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We're really looking forward to staying in touch. And hopefully the work that we can accomplish together is going to be transformative. So OGP's work in general is transformative, but we have the opportunity here to build on this really wonderful foundation of transparency and civic engagement to embrace open in an even bigger way, I think, with open education. So open education, whether it's the practices or the policies or the resources or some combination, makes it possible to co-create better societies. All right, I'm going to end there. We both want to thank all of you for your participation today. And since we are an international community, what we were hoping to do to wrap up is just have everyone unmute their microphones, and on the count of 3, say goodbye in your own language or maybe a language that you've learned. Okay, so let's try this. If you just unmute your microphone and say it on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That was really, really great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you too.
Yes, huge thank you from OGP to Jennryn and Jan for being with us today and for hosting such an interactive and informative session. We really appreciate it.
Oh, our pleasure. Yeah, anytime.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
I think we all have learned also a little ideas and tricks to use in our future calls, making it fun. But just to as Jennryn was saying, and Jan, and this is something we see as a long-term cooperation with Creative Commons and OGP, in this case local, particularly at the local level, not only to support our members in their work and commitment making, but also in the long run to create a space for shared learning and exchanges, and be open to members and people that is interesting on knowing, on understanding better the possibilities of these tools. And let me wrap up with a personal experience around Creative Commons, just to wrap up the call. But back in 2000, I think it was 12 or 13, and I was working for the city of Buenos Aires, and we did this initiative to use to license all our webpage content as Creative Commons. And it was a huge, not a huge, but we had some discussions with legal people inside the government and some different areas. But it just became such a powerful tool then was distributed to other agencies to start learning about the usage of the licenses. And what we saw with that is that example was actually digital transformation, digital change of the thinking. That today is the flavor of the month, right? Everyone is talking about digital transformation and da, 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 da. But that was an exercise to think about your content, your production of content, and how you distribute that, and how you access that, and how open is that to people in such a different way that it became a learning experience from trying to implement. I think it's similar when you work, for example, with open data in other areas, right? So just want to share that I personally been very much involved, and we want this program to have a clear space, and in our Slack channel, the idea is to have an open education channel so we can share, and maybe Creative Commons can help us to have their news or events or invitation to people that is excited about that's a contemporary thing, which is open education, right? In this moment. So just to share that excitement with the group, and thank you again to all our participants today, and whoever is watching this after the session, go back to our Slack channel. As we always said, you will find peers to keep trying to change the world little by little.